we'll try one. I'm not going to use a chair. I might jump off stage. I did a speech with Magic Johnson. It was a huge stage for Denny's, and like 30 yards. And I'm sitting there and barely got a laugh out of anyone. And then Magic stands on the floor. There's 7,000 franchisees. And he's like, I love pancakes. It was for Denny's, right? Everyone cracks up like this was some genius. The guy's so charismatic, but it's a matter of energy. I'm here to teach lessons or illustrate lessons with my journey. I believe life is just about lessons. And from the beginning of time, from Sanskrit on, it just says life is about lessons. The lessons are going to keep on coming. The same lessons will keep on coming with pain until you learn them. The most unique thing that I've learned through history, and I study history to study human nature because human nature never changes, as you'll see if you study human history and all the lessons that continually get taught again and again and again, and the pain just keeps coming and coming and coming. There's two interesting things that I've learned. One, we are going to forget every single lesson we ever learn at any time. That's why I put up there, be kind to your future self, because I've learned gratitude, kindness. I've learned all about the ego. And yet, even on stage, I see myself forgetting the lessons that I've learned. And I see people all the time. The most powerful part of what is learned through history about lessons is that you actually have the capability of remembering even lessons you may not know at any time. In fact, via technology, all levels of technology and vibration, we now have more ability to access the lessons that we've learned than ever before. And I think it's causing a divide as well. So I'd like to take you through my journey to help learn lessons. Good thing you have paper. You might want to write one down. It makes it easier to remember the lessons. And then I'm going to leave time because I really think that you don't care what I have to say or think you want to learn. So moreover, I'd love to answer questions for a little bit at the end because I want to know what you want to know, and you can get my skewed perspective of what I've learned from these lessons. I was born in Akron, Ohio, sports town, sports hospital. When I was born, I was actually born in the same hospital as LeBron James and Steph Curry, Akron General Hospital. So I think I still am destined to be the commissioner of the NBA because God knows I can't play basketball. My dad, we had 6 kids. My dad left when I was 5 years old. I'm very emotional, so I apologize. You're going to have to deal with it. My dad left, and he was my hero. I was 5 years old, 5 boys and 1 girl in my family. I was the middle child, which is how I ended up on stage. The other middle child is a famous rabbi, so we both have the same destiny, just different beliefs. And but my dad left, and he was my hero. And my mom, it was the 70s, so my dad really wasn't paying child support. He was very wealthy. He married a girl that was closer to my age, I think, than his. And my mom was an educator. She was also a black belt in the martial arts, which made her a really unique second-grade teacher. Extraordinary one. All my siblings went to the Ivy Leagues except for me. They Harvard, Penn, Columbia, summa cum laude. Extraordinary intellect. But my mom was a black belt in the martial art. In fact, a third-degree black belt. She didn't look like it. But a third-degree black belt in the martial art of Jewish guilt. And it drove us. People always say, God, your siblings are so successful. I'm like, yeah. My mom had 2 rules. Lesson number 1 of parenting. With 6 kids and a single mom, completely broke. Rule number 1 was guilt them to death. Rule number 2 was wake them up early. So my mom woke us up, which I still consider a great gift, at 5 a.m. every single day, 7 days a week. And then she let us reign free if we could. Friday nights would come. She's like, go out if you want. I'll wake you up at 5 a.m. tomorrow. We were mostly too tired to cause any trouble because nothing good happens after midnight. And she was pretty wise. Meanwhile, she had another philosophy, which is why my siblings were so successful. And it was ingrained in us from a very young age. Doctor, lawyer, or failure. That's how I was raised, and my siblings all, my mom would work 2 jobs when I was little and really showed me, I believe, that kids don't learn from us, they just watch us, right? They're not going to listen to one word we say, but they will watch you, and I watch my mom like a hawk. I love her to death, but she would work 2 jobs, and second grade teacher, 6 kids, come home, pack our dinners in a paper bag, and then drive around to convenience stores, 7-Elevens. They had something called Lawson's in Akron, and fill up the turnstiles with greeting cards so we'd have enough money to eat. She would have us study in the Country Squire station wagon. So the older siblings would read to the younger siblings. The younger ones would try to learn, and my siblings all learned, and I would sit there and say, I'm going to be rich. I don't need to know this. I don't need to read. I don't need to listen to you, because I'm going to be rich. I'm going to forget school. I'm going to buy mom a house and a car. You guys can all study, but I'm going to buy mom a house and a car because I'm going to be rich. And they would tell me what a loser I was and how much trouble I was going to be in. And I truly believed that money would buy me happiness from 5 years old. And the reason I thought that is, although it was very economically challenging with a 2-bedroom apartment and siblings, so many of us in the economic situation, I was super happy as a kid. Super happy. My mom gave us an extraordinary life. She was a great cook. There was so much love in the house. It was a lot of chaotic excitement and a lot of intellect, but it was really a happy life. But the only time I wasn't happy was when I'd catch my mom crying because the car broke down or she was stressed about money. And so in my heart, I said, I'm going to be rich. That's all I wanted to do. Now, I didn't like to study that much, although I was born with some gifts. So I decided the best way for me to be rich was to play professional football. I know. It's funny when I tell people I want to be a lawyer, nobody laughs. They're like, of course you do, you moron. Anyway, I don't know what I was born with, but I literally thought I was going to be a professional football player. I knew one thing, that I could run scared faster than most people could angry. I had that going for me, and I had a huge mouth, so in a 2-bedroom apartment, I could juke and jive and get away from all my brothers. So when I got out onto a football field, it worked out really well. And I believe that things happen from consistency, and I'll talk about the continuum of conscious, subconscious, and unconscious mind, how the cellular memory affects our minds, and there are no pathways in the mind, and there's an unconscious competency by consistent behavior. And for me, the most consistent thing that I did as a child was play football. Most consistent every day, persistently, without quit, in the pursuit of my potential as a football player. And because of that, I got a scholarship to play football in college. I was a kick returner, punt returner, defensive back and nickel back, who was 147 pounds and 5'7". And I worked really, really hard to get there. And I literally, when I went to college, I felt it's going to happen. I went to college. The running back who recruited me was now on the Raiders, and I thought for sure this was the place for me. And my freshman year, my very first play, I was on the kickoff team on the very end. Something called a bullet is for the fastest kid on the team. This flies down to tackle the receiver. So I line up, and of course I'm so jacked up. I fly down. Sure enough, I break through the wall, and there he was. This big guy just caught the ball, and I just smashed him. And I remember 1 second before I laid him out, that's it, NFL, here I come. College is nothing, this is not a big deal. Next thing I know, I was being lifted up backwards, flying in the air on my back, landing on my back, and the receiver, the running back, the carrier ran me over. In fact, he stepped on me. I'm proud to say that I'm probably the very first person ever to get Christian Okoye's autograph. I still have his size 13 shoe on my thing. But when I was lying there on my back as a freshman at 147 pounds, I remember thinking to myself one critical lesson: doctor, lawyer, or failure. So through that season, I decided I better start studying. I went to go visit my oldest brother, who was in residency at UCLA. And like most 18-year-olds, I'm now going to be a doctor to be rich. I'm trying to figure out what the best kind of doctor to be rich. Probably was going to be a plastic surgeon, since I now had moved to Southern California. Seemed like a good way to be rich. Orange County might be a great place to live as well. And I visit my brother, and the first thing out of my mouth was, man, I hate hospitals. My brother, who's doing his residency, almost falls over. He goes, Dave, what do you mean you hate hospitals? I'm like, well, I'm going to be a sports doctor. I'm going to work in training centers and fields. I don't need to be in a hospital to do that. He said, you got to be like 7 years of studying in a hospital and practicing in a hospital to be any type of doctor. And then he gave me the greatest gift he ever gave me, because he said, David, You need to be more interested than interesting. You need to be more interested than interesting. And this has held true in my life, this lesson of asking more questions, being more interested, providing value. All the things that I learned later on in life all stem from that one thing of interest, of focus, of intention, that you need to be more interested than interesting. And later on in life, I was blessed to run the most notable sports agency in the world with Lee Steinberg. Most of you know Louis Jerry Maguire. But I have been approached by so many young people who tell me, I want to be just like you, Mr. Meltzer. I want to be a sports agent just like you. And I think to myself, oh boy, you better be more interested than interesting. So I immediately, out of that, decided doctor, lawyer, or failure. If I can't be a doctor, I better become a lawyer. Now what I did is started studying really hard to be a lawyer, but I reverse engineered my goal. I was always very focused. I wanted to be rich. So I did all the research, asked a ton of people, be more interested than interesting, what's the highest paying job out of law school? And what I found out, it was an oil and gas litigator. They seem to make a lot of money. So I did my research, I studied real hard. I could have went to any law school there was. Tulane University in New Orleans had the top maritime law program, the top maritime professors, most students that got hired by Shell, Chevron, et cetera. So I went to law school there to be an oil and gas litigator. Studied very hard in law school, and when I graduated, I actually had 2 job offers. Before I got those job offers, though, we were in a recession, and I remember praying to God. I remember praying because I had about $100,000 in law loans. My oldest brother had passed away from HIV. I had lived my entire life blessed. I literally, everything went my way. Got a scholarship to college. I went to this great law school. And for the first time in life, things weren't going my way. And I remember praying to God, if you just give me a job, just one job that would buy my mom a house, a car, and pay off my law loans, then I will shovel shit with my hands 6 days a week, 12 hours a day in gratitude. I believed it. That's where my mindset was, that I believed that if I could just do that for my mom, that it would be fine. It wouldn't really, what I was saying to God was, it doesn't really matter what I do. I'm willing to do the work. I want this to be my manifestation of happiness. And so I ended up graduating, and I had 2 job offers, one to be an oil and gas litigator, and the other was to sell legal research online in 1992. Online was not the same. Luckily, I'm here in the Silicon Valley. There's people that are actually over 25 in here, so we remember what 9600 baud modems were in DOS and XT computers. I asked my mother what I should do. Both were very high-paying jobs. One, obviously, was to be this oil and gas litigator. The other was to sell legal research online, which took no bar degree, or they were only hiring lawyers, but I didn't have to take the bar. So I asked my mom what I should do. Without blinking, my mom said, David, you need to be a real lawyer, because this internet thing, it's a fad. If you're going to write down another rule, it's very important in my life. Another important rule that I learned, or lesson that I learned then, was just because somebody loves you doesn't mean they give you good advice. And this goes both ways as parents and as children, because I find one of the biggest tragedies of the ego-based consciousness is that we want to please others so much that we manifest what other people want for us. And then we end up resenting the people that are closest to us because we actually are capable of manifesting it. And I see that happen so many times in our life, and we do that all the times in sports as well. In fact, my entire life is, as you'll see, this integration of sports, technology, consciousness. It's a perfect conference for me to speak at, which is why I'm so excited to be here. I decided for the first time to go against my mom's wishes. And the reason I did is I truly believed I was going to make more money in the internet than I was practicing law, and if I was wrong, I could always go back to practice law. Plus, my mom made me take the bar anyway, so I figured I could go back. I ended up 9 months into my job making my first $1 million. And a lot of people say, wow, you know, you must have an unconscious competency to make money, to attract that much money. Maybe, and I think I do, but I learned some valuable lessons. The reason that I made so much money was, first of all, most of the people made about $250,000 a year. But I actually wasn't as capable of most of the people there because I was right out of law school, Yes, I had natural sales ability, but I really didn't have the relationship capital. These people had been working these territories for years, a company called West Publishing, complete monopoly if anyone knows anything about the law, the Keynote system, etc. But what I did was I decided I'd beat people with math. And I decided, well, most of these people work 8 hours a day of productivity. And they have an average of efficiency and statistical success in what they do. In fact, their average of efficiency and success are higher than mine at 25 years old. So what if I could work twice as many hours, 16 hours of productivity, completely focused? What if I could double the efficiency that I worked at, which would equal 32 hours of productivity, and then have a statistical success? I didn't think I could beat them on the closing ratio, but one thing I noticed about the people is the statistical success has two factors, not just how much we close, but how many people are available to me. How many people are available to me? So if I could get 20 people in a day available to me, I didn't have to have the higher closing ratio, but I could have a higher statistical success. If I could have twice the statistical success, my 32 hours of productivity could become 64 hours of productivity in a day, 8 days of work in one day, plus I'd work 7 days. So every week for me was 56 days of productivity. Right? 56 days of productivity. So in 9 months, I actually worked 10 years, and it's not that impressive. I made $100,000 a year. But what I learned was the idea of productivity and accessibility. And I've lived my life understanding value. Productivity is how much value am I providing. Accessibility was how accessible was I to others, and how was I accessing what I want. And this played a key role in my own maturation to understand productivity and accessibility, and using that as a lens every day of my life to attain what I really wanted to attain, which was to be happy. And what was really going to make me happy occurred when 9 months out of law school, when I bought my mom a house, I bought my mom a car, and I paid off my law loans. At that point in my life, I was convinced that money buys love. Money buys anything that I want, especially happiness. And so I became even more driven to make more money. And so I went and worked extremely hard. We were blessed 3 years into my career. We were bought by Thomson Reuters for $3.4 billion in 1995. That was when $1 billion was a lot of money to buy a company for. There wasn't many that did that. And I was smart enough to brand myself not as a lawyer anymore, but as a technology guru. And I came here to the Silicon Valley. I had a middleware company called EveryPath, where we raised $169 million. And then by the time I was 32, I ran Samsung's phone division. And the first convergence device, a Windows CE device called the PCE phone. Very clever, right? PC phone, PCE phone. And man, I was married. I had 3 kids. I was super happy. And I was living in an ego-based consciousness that still surprises me, but I'm blessed to say that I've learned a lot from it. I, at that time in my life, thought for sure money buys happiness. Now, at that time, my dad came back into my life. In fact, at 30 years old, my dad came back into my life. My dad made one real mistake. I don't talk about him as often as my mother, but at 10 years old, my dad being my hero, and for 5 years, you could imagine the radical humility that my mom had, because I would tell her all the time what a loser she was and what a great heroic dad I had, and why couldn't she be more like my father while she's struggling to feed me, and he's out there doing whatever he does. But at 10 years old, my dad made a big mistake. He forgot my birthday. Now, that wasn't the huge part of the mistake. The bigger part of the mistake was that when I called him crying, which I thought as his favorite son or as my hero, and I said, "Dad, how could you forget my birthday?" I thought he would tell me the truth, right? That he lives in Houston now, that things got away from me, didn't realize what day it was. He was going to call me later in the day. I don't know what he was going to say, but instead, and now that I'm a father and older, I know why he said it. He said, "I didn't forget your birthday. I just don't believe in birthdays." Well, at 10 years old, I was pretty wise, an older soul, and it really killed me. I broke down crying. It was the first time my mom ever said anything negative about my father, which completely turned my father from hero into devil. And I went from anything my dad touched was gold to me to I hate everything about my father. Later to find out all the things I hated about my father, that he was a liar, a manipulator, an overseller, a back-end seller, an exaggerator, was all the things I hated about myself. And he taught me that lesson at 30, when we reunited and started in some sort of quantum shift. And my dad gave me the first warning of what was going to happen in my life. And he sent me a birthday present. A big box came at 30 from my dad. I was super excited. I opened up this box, and there was a sport coat just like this. And I put it on immediately. I'm in tears. My wife's looking at me. She's like, God, you cry over everything. I'm like, yeah, sometimes you're an amazing speaker because it doesn't work unless you cry. And I said, wow, and it fit me. And my wife kind of winked at me like, your dad called me to get your actual sizes. And I'm thinking, wow, my dad really gets it. This is going to be great. My relationship's going to be healed. And I'm looking at it, and I'm going to give him a call. And I open the jacket up, and everything in the inside was torn out. Now I'm pissed. I'm like, I don't get it. Why is he punishing me? I'm telling my wife. I call him. I'm like, Dad, I got your present. Thank you for remembering my birthday, but why did you give me a jacket I can't wear? And he said, it's not for wearing. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, it's to remember me. I'm like, what? That you're an asshole? He's like, no, it's to remember me and to remember that you're just like me. And at that time, at 30 years old, I'm thinking, are you kidding me? I'm just like you? I have this gorgeous wife, my 3 beautiful daughters. I have everything I've ever dreamed of, and I'm just like you? I'm like, I'm nothing like you. He said, you're exactly like me, and it scares me, and I've done a terrible job, and I'm sorry, but you got to hang that jacket up in your closet to look at every day to remind you of that you're just like me, and I don't want you to be the richest man in the cemetery. You can't take anything with you when you're gone. I want you buried in that jacket. It hit me. It was the first awakening of, man, am I really living my life the wrong way? My wife, my mom had consistently told me I don't get it, and I'd say things, of course, in the great ego-based consciousness. I don't get it. Look around you. I have a Ferrari. Tell the nanny I don't get it. You don't work. I'd look at my mom and say, you made $17,000 a year. You live in a house that I bought you, and I don't get it. I've made everything myself. I've done all this myself, and you're going to tell me that I'm lost? And now my dad told me that I'm lost? Well, sure enough, by 32, I ended up getting fired. I used to tell people all the time, I'm so blessed. At 32, I semi-retired. Well, what happened was Samsung became the second largest manufacturer of phones. Sarbanes-Oxley came out. Although I had a law degree, I was not prepared to run a company like that. I was a great salesman. I'd raised money. I'd built relationships. I had sold from Good Morning America on this great idea of convergence devices, later known as smartphones. But I was not a CEO at 32 years old. And so they asked me to leave. They paid me a lot of money, so if you're going to get fired, it's good to get paid to get fired. But my ego for years could never stand on a stage and tell you that they let me go because I didn't have the capacity or the capability to be a CEO of that company. So I became an investor, and I started surrounding myself with the wrong people and the wrong ideas. And the second warning came when I went to go play golf with a friend of mine who I actually grew up with, and we hadn't been hanging out that much. And so I asked him, hey, how come we haven't seen each other? Why won't you hang out? And he said, because I don't like who you hang out with. And at that time I looked at him like, oh yeah, but I'm not like those guys. I'm not going to those places and doing the things that they're doing. And he looked me right in the eye and he just said, you can lie to me, but don't lie to yourself. I went home crushed because I knew he was telling the truth, and I knew where I was going because I was surrounding myself with the wrong people and the wrong ideas. I then came home a couple weeks later. I was partying with a guy named Little John. I came home 5:30 in the morning, a little intoxicated and maybe on some other things. And 5:30 in the morning, I'm walking up to my huge house with a huge courtyard, and I see the 5-foot silhouette of my wonderful wife. I remember walking up and thinking, oh God, what do I have to do here? And she answers the door and she looks at me and she goes, you are not a rock star. I looked at her and I said, I may not be, but I sure feel like one. She then sent me up to the room. When I woke up in the morning, came downstairs, vaguely remembering what happened, for the first time she told me, thank goodness, that she wasn't happy. She told me I better take stock in who I was and what I wanted to become, or she was going to leave me. Now, I met my wife in the 4th grade. I know in Hebrew they say b'sheret. I was up, she lived the house behind me. I remember moving to California with no friends, looking out the window, and this beautiful girl skateboarded by. Later, in 6th grade camp, I actually asked that girl through my friend to go steady with me, where she said in front of everyone, no, tell him to ask me himself. So when I got home, I threw egg at her and hit her in the back of the head with it. I then proceeded the next couple years to throw rocks at her, tell her she was ugly, asked her why her friends were better looking than her. And her cousin was one of my best friends, and through high school, I used to ask him, God, do you think she'd go out with me now? And he would say, no, she hates you, she's afraid of you. And I'd run into her when I was in college. I even ran into her in law school. I'd gotten engaged when I was in law school, which later I broke off. But I ran into her, and her mother was dying. Her mother was dying of cancer. We had this extraordinary conversation. Every time I talked to her, I felt like I'm talking to Barry. So, Barry, you may be my second wife, but I feel the same way. But I literally had this conversation. Later, she told me that she went to the hospital the next day to tell her mom, oh, do you know who I ran into last night? And she said, who? She said, oh, David Meltzer. And her mom's words about me were, oh, isn't that little shit that threw the egg at you? She then explained what I was doing, and she told her, oh, you should go out with him. And she said, well, he's engaged. And then she said, well, you should go out with someone like him. Later did I find out her mom passed away. I graduated law school, broke off the engagement. A year later was in Mexico at some resort, really crowded, and somebody pushed me, and who did I bump into but her? I knew that this was the girl for me. I still is, thank goodness. But I was terrified when she told me she was going to be, and I was so lost that I remember when she told me and I went back to take stock in who I was, being so angry at her. Like saying to myself, are you kidding me? She doesn't work. We have these kids, this house, these cars, right? Blame, shame, justification all over. And I woke up in the morning and I was still pissed, and then came depression. And I couldn't get out of bed. I remember being so depressed and just sitting there going, God, I have screwed up my entire life. I'm going to lose the one person I've, right? This amazing woman, forget all my money, forget everything. I was terrified. And then Rocky came on the TV, right? I remember literally telling myself, if I can look up, I can get up, I can get up, I can look up. Here we go. And I started to outline what actually is in that book, Connected to Goodness, an outline of what I wanted in my life, why, and how I was going to get it. And utilizing this philosophy that came to me that has really evolved. From that moment on, I went on a different journey. I wanted to figure out what, why, and how I could be happy without drugs, without alcohol, without being a manipulator, without being a liar, a cheat, an over-exaggerator, an overseller, a back-end seller. How could I be happy with the truth, pursuing my potential? And lo and behold, I started to work in a different direction. And I actually had gotten a job with TELUS to be the president of their data division. And I was all set to go to Europe, travel the world, make a lot of money, do what I did again. I was never scared. I was just going to make this thing happen. And sure enough, a friend calls and said, can you help me? I said, sure. I need you to represent me for a reality show with Magic Johnson called Showtime. I'm like, well, I'm not a lawyer. Well, you have a law degree, don't you? Yeah. You passed the bar, didn't you? Yeah, but I've never been a lawyer. I paid a lot of lawyers. You know, he said, no, you're the best negotiator I've ever met, Dave. You go with me. I'm like, okay, where are we going? We're going to Lee Steinberg's office. You mean Jerry Maguire, Lee Steinberg? Yeah, I'll go. So I went there to negotiate a deal, I always say with, but truly against Lee Steinberg. Within 48 hours of meeting Lee Steinberg, he offered me the chief operating officer job at Lee Steinberg Sports and Entertainment. 6 months later, I was CEO. Through this process, a whole bunch of changes were happening. I saw the movie The Secret. I started meeting people like Lee Brower and Reverend Beckwith and Jack Canfield and meeting these people. But I just have to tell you, I was seriously resistant to it. And my wife, who's tremendously spiritual, would tell me, you don't get it. Can't you just see, these aren't accidents. I'm like, it's just a coincidence. The reason Lee hired me is because I've built so many things. I owned a golf course, a ski mountain. I'm so successful. And she's looking at me like, you lost puppy, right? You're living your life better, but you're lost. And so I started a development house in India while I was with Lee. Part of the reason he hired me was my technology background. We both agreed that technology was going to play a huge part in sports. And so he had built the first blog. There's all these things that we're doing were extremely exciting. So I hired all these developers in Calcutta, India, and I'm flying to India. And I sit next to this wonderful little lady, and she looks at me, and she said, "Are you okay?" And literally, in my ego-based conscious mind, I looked at her and said, "Do you know who I am?" And I'm not lying. I said, "Of course I'm okay. I have everything I want. I'm super happy." And she goes, "You have so much light, but you're blocking it." And I consciously remember rolling my eyes back going, this is going to be a long flight. Like literally, like what is she talking about? I'm blocking my light. Then she asked me a question. She said, "Do you meditate?" And I looked at her and I just couldn't hold back. Meditate? Meditate's for people that are sick, broke, high on their mom's couch, dreaming about they want. I grew up in Akron, Ohio with nothing, with a single mom and 6 kids. I've made every single thing myself. I bought my mom a house and a car, 9 months out of law school. I have a Ferrari, a Porsche, a huge home. I have a ski mountain. I have this. I run Lee Steinberg Sports Entertainment. I don't have time to meditate, literally. And she looked at me and she said, "That's so sad." I was like, "Why is that sad?" She goes, "Because I could teach you to vibrate faster." Now I'm thinking I'm sitting next to pure crazy. Literally, I'm like, "Okay, what do you mean vibrate faster?" She said, "Well, you know everything vibrates." I said, "Yes, I get that, right? The earth vibrates the slowest, plants, animals, humans, sound, light, and then thought." And then she changed my whole world with one thing. "Do you know what vibrates the fastest?" And I thought about it, and I'm like, I don't know. She said, "The truth. The truth vibrates the fastest, and you can only be aware of that which vibrates equal to or less than you." Through meditation, I can teach you to elevate your vibration. Not just the vibration of your cells, but of your mind and of your soul. I can teach you to vibrate and give you awareness and power that you've never, ever experienced in your life. In your terms, for example, imagine having an awareness of when to buy or sell. You believe money's happiness? Imagine having that awareness. Knowing when to buy or sell. How long would it take you to be a billionaire? That excited me. I said, "Wow." She said, "Come and stay at a workshop." And I remember telling my wife I was going to stay a couple extra days to go to this workshop of theta meditation and quantum healing. And my wife immediately thought I was cheating on her. She literally, I think, did more vetting and due diligence about this workshop I was going to and the person running it than anything ever in her entire life. Even when we bought a house, I think she knew less about it because she did not believe that I was going to stay and learn to meditate. That was the quantum shift. When I experienced true meditation to understand peace, my life changed. The interesting thing is when I went through my quantum shift in my journey and I started to shift the paradigm of value and understand about the ego-based consciousness and the truth-based consciousness and how pathetic I was and how lost I was and how unaware I was, everything was falling apart in my life financially. 2007, 2008, I lost over $100 million in my portfolio. $100 million in my portfolio. Someone whose entire identity was about being rich. Someone who thought the only way to be happy was to be rich. Someone who thought that money could buy you happiness. It was all gone. All gone. And I remember thinking to myself, that's okay. Everyone else was terrified. The only thing that terrified me was 2 things. One, when I realized I had to drive up to work and that Lee Steinberg and Warren Moon, who was also my partner, my office sat between the two. I always say my Jewish hero and my African-American hero, right there, that I would have to go tell them that the guy they hired because he was so successful, the next Jeff Morad, was nothing but a bankrupt, deadbeat, loser, failure, just like his mom had predicted. And I was terrified to tell him. But I went there, and Lee being Lee and Warren being Warren, it really wasn't a big deal. We didn't hire you for what you did in the past. We're hiring you for what you do now. Stay present. You're doing fine. Made me feel great until I had to go home and realize one other thing, that I had to go tell my mom. It's kind of funny. I was working through ego-based issues, but I literally, while I was driving over to my mom's house, I pictured her, like Red Fox. Some of us are old enough to remember. I'm coming, Elizabeth. Right? I thought when I told her that I had lost everything, that was it. Or she was going to guilt me to death and I would die. But as I was walking up the stairs to her house, I realized one really bad thing. I'd forgotten to take my mom's house out of my name. I'd lost my mom's house. It was in the bankruptcy. Now, not only did I have to tell my mom my biggest fear ever, that I was broke, I had no money and no identity, but more importantly, she would have to move. When I told my mom and she opened the door, I broke down crying. It's my standard. I broke down crying. I said, Mom, I'm so sorry. I've lost everything. I went bankrupt and I made a horrible mistake. I lost your house and you're going to have to move. Without blinking, my mom looked at me and asked me if I was okay, if I needed any money, if there's anything she could do for me. That moment changed my life because that's when I realized I truly was lost. That my mom, although she made $17,000 a year, knew so much more than I knew. That unconditionally, she understood that she was there to have everything come through her for me and for others. All the kids, everything, all the things that I looked down upon her now have elevated. I decided at that time, I came home and told my wife, I'm going to live my life differently. I'm on this journey, but when I was little, I lived in a world of literally not enough, right? I was a victim. All those rich kids, they were so lucky. If I just was born that way, I lived in this world of not enough, and I was going to work all my life in a universe of scarcity, knowing that it will never be enough. And then I evolved into this state before my mom told me and taught me that valuable lesson. I lived in a state of just enough, right? Everything was for me. Everything I did, I thought I was an optimist. I literally did. I thought things would go wrong. Like, no, don't worry, everything always happens for me. It'll be fine, for me, for me. What I learned in that moment with my mom was that I lived in a world of more than enough. The one my mom lived in. The one that I see in Africa when I volunteer in Kenya in the Bagani, that everything comes through me for others. There's more than enough of everything for everyone, and that I'm going to have complete faith in the universe of that fact. And I'm going to live by that faith. And I realized there's two currencies, and I was living with the wrong energy, the wrong currency. The first currency is just like there's lessons. We're here in a body. We live at this vibration. One of the hardest things about this conference and others is that there is not a connection between the higher vibration of enlightenment and where we live. Here's what I've learned. The truth is, money is extremely important. Money is an energy. It's a currency. It flows, right? And if you have a green card, you can put it in Amazon and you have so much power. And if you have a platinum card, you have a little more power. Still goes right, and it manifests. Money manifests. It's an energy. I put it in Amazon. I get what I want. If I have a black card, put it in there, more than enough comes. Once again, more than enough. What I realized was money is super important in this world, in this vibration. Money does not buy happiness, but it allows you to shop. It allows you to shop. And it seems funny, but the truth is, if you shop for the right things, you're going to be happy. If you shop for the wrong things, you're not going to be happy. Last year when I turned 50, I started shopping for the right things. I bought 2 community centers in Africa, impacting millions of people, especially young women, changing lives, making people happy, shopping for the right things. And I think it's really important that we understand we live at this vibration, and money is the currency of this vibration that allows you to shop. And I encourage you to manifest as much money as you can and allow it to come through you with appreciation, gratitude, add value to it, and give it away. You will not be a big enough vehicle, vessel, whatever you want to handle as much money that will come to you if you have that philosophy and live in a world of more than enough. Now, the greater currency is faith, right? Faith. Faith is an energy that we put into the current of the universe that allows us to shop for whatever we want. The thing is, the field of intention is unlimited. Most people can't fathom infinity, but it's unlimited. It has everything for everyone. There is no scarcity. There is plenty of it. And what is faith, though? Faith is what we think, what we say, what we do, what we believe, and the unconscious competencies that we have from our personality traits, our characteristics, our obsessions, our addictions, and the energy that that creates. Therefore, the consistent, persistent behavior that we have is so crucial to have faith. Why is that? Because we have to consistently, every single day, input data into our cellular memory. Every single day, in order for it to stick, there's 10,000 new thoughts that we have every day, 10,000 new things. And if you don't think this applies to sports, you will realize very quickly why people like Tiger Woods are Tiger Woods. Why? Because consistently, every day, persistently, without quit, he's in the pursuit of his perfection. Every day, a cellular memory happens, that 10,000 inputs, that goes to the 40,000 of the same thoughts you have in your head. There's neural pathways that are formed. Some people say 21 days. I like to do 30 days before a neural pathway, before a habit is formed, a discipline is formed. And why is that important? Because if we can get that into the subconscious mind, we can then change our personality traits, our characteristics, our obsessions, addictions, and our energy. An unconscious competency allows us to change the thermostat of our lives. What does that mean? That allows the pain of the lessons to go away. Why do we keep on ending up in the same place, right? I have teenage daughters. I'm never going to date a guy like that again. 3 weeks later, the same guy comes, but with black hair. It's an energy. It's an energy. But if you're focused in on every single day. So what does that mean? 2 minutes a day is worth more than 2 hours in a Saturday? Absolutely. Absolutely. You want to meditate? Meditate 2 minutes a day. Don't worry about going to a workshop for 4 days once a month. That's not going to do anything for you. You're going to set and settle right back down to your thermostat. You need to have consistent behavior. In fact, happiness is created from the enjoyment of the consistent, everyday, persistent, without quit pursuit of your potential, whatever that potential should be. That's the definition of happiness, and happiness is the problem that we have right now. I'm on a quest and a journey to help empower people to be happy. That's the problem today. I did some research. An average American is happy 15 days a year. Why do you think we have an opiate problem? We have a happiness problem. We don't have an opiate problem. Happy people aren't addicted to drugs. They don't need to fulfill that. They don't start doing consistent things to fulfill themselves other than things that make them happy or expand them or grow exponentially, accelerate their lives. I do a lot with entrepreneurs, and I always say this perspective of acceleration and growth is so important to being happy. By the way, the number one cause of death for people under 50 now, suicide. Imagine that. We have a happiness problem. We have a happiness problem. We have to learn how to be consistent and to be happy. We have to learn how to work outside the ego. How do we do that? Number one, we have to define the ego-based consciousness. Right? I believe everyone's connected to that which makes them happy, right? Connected to goodness. I just believe that the ego corrodes the connection to that which inspires us. The cleaner the connection, the more inspired you are, regardless of your age. And I've seen it before, and I see it every day because I have about 30 kids that are about this age that try to keep up with me every day. But I'm more inspired. I'm more inspired. I have a cleaner connection to inspiration. Why? Because I learned stop, drop, and roll when you catch on fire. Here's what happens when we're in ego-based consciousness. And I'll give you an example. I walk outside. I wake up at 4 in the morning every day. I live my life so I can wake up at 4 in the morning every day. I live my life focused in on acceleration and exponential growth. And I walk outside 4 o'clock. I meditate. By 10 minutes more, I'm out to the gym. A minimum of a 1 hour a day spent on my health. As I'm walking out to the gym at about 4:25, I notice that my 17-year-old daughter's car, Saturday morning, is not in front of my house. Now, ego-based consciousness took over for me, right? I was pissed. One of the things, right? Need to be right, need to be offended, need to be separate, inferior, superior, need to be angry, anxious, resentful, all these different feelings of the ego that we have to start identifying. Well, I was pissed. One of the favorite ones. Well, when we're pissed, what happens is we accelerate in the wrong trajectory, right? Literally in the wrong trajectory. We don't just go in the wrong direction, we accelerate in the wrong direction. And what happens is our mind, body, and soul catch on fire when we're in the ego. It catches on fire. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they don't understand fear. I get so many athletes that tell me all the time, fear motivates me, Dave. When it can't, mathematically can't. Fear is the biggest depreciator of all. It'll suck your soul dry of energy. But what does it do? It focuses us. Fear focuses us. I was telling Barry earlier, how do you think that grandma who comes out in the driveway and sees the baby stuck under a car has the strength and power to lift a car? Pure focus, intense focus. Now, nobody talks about what happens afterwards when she puts the car down and has torn ligaments and muscles and are sore and her back is, all these things has happened to her. And that's what happens in life. We use fear and we think that it's motivating us, and all it's doing is creating intense focus. So we need to have a substitute for focus. We need to have an inspirational one so that we can gain energy and gain inspiration when fear comes up, because fear is a necessity and part of us. So I decided as I walked out and saw that card that, oh my gosh, I'm moving in the wrong trajectory as I'm dialing and about to swear at my daughter, and instead I stop. I drop my blood pressure and breathe, and I roll in the right direction because my mind, body, and soul are on fire. What does that mean? I called my daughter after breathing, and I said, where are you? I'm in my room. Where's your car? It's at the grocery store. You told me that if kids were drinking, that I was better off Ubering home and I shouldn't get in a car with other kids that are drinking, even if I'm not. Oh, okay, go back to sleep. Now, it's an interesting story, and it, to me, was amazing because normally, years past, I would have picked up that phone and screamed at her, where the F is your car? What the F are you doing? And attacked her out of ego and accelerated in the wrong direction, which then would have caused her to attack me. It would have caused her to work in an ego-based consciousness, and the next time kids were drinking, I know what would have went through her head. I'm better off driving home. And then if something canceled may have happened, then of course it just gets even worse. And pretty soon, because I'm living in an ego-based consciousness, I've ruined one of the most treasured relationships that anyone can have, a father-daughter relationship, all because I don't know myself. We don't look at acceleration and growth. We don't look in this way, and it's so true. I'll tell you what entrepreneurs do, as I'm getting to, is we got a 20-year-old here, 10 years, he has a vision and a purpose and a passion. He has a great idea, but he needs a lot of help, and it takes a lot of time. And he's working and working for 10 years, living on couches, not getting married. We all know, we see it here, what it takes. He's 30 years old now. His parents are extremely disappointed in him. His girlfriend broke up with him. He's broke. And he looks at it and he says, I'm 30 years old and I'm only 10% of the way where I thought I'd be. It's been 10 years and I'm 10% of the way. 99% quit. This could be anything. It doesn't have to be business. It could be relationships, anything in our life. This is the way the mind works when we attach our emotions to an outcome. 10 years go by, I'm 10% of the way there, and I'm the biggest loser there is. And so what I'm going to do, 99% of us, is go do what everybody else wants for us, and I'll manifest that. Here's the saddest thing, is that if instead that young man over there looked at the exponential growth and acceleration, stayed in the truth consciousness, he would have realized that at the pace and speed that he was learning and growing, that in 5 years, he'd be 20% of the way there at 35 years old. And at 2.5 years later, he would be 40% of the way there, 37.5. Yet, most of that 1% that hung on, usually by 37 and a half, at 40% of the way there, they quit. Another 99% of that 1% quit. And the saddest thing is, by the time he's 38 and 3/4, he's 80% of the way there. And before he's 40 years old, he's 160% of the way there. And then everyone's calling him lucky. Oh, that's my favorite son. What a great job he did. I always knew he could do it. And the greatest thing, in 3/4 of a month after that, he's 320% of the way there, then 640% of the way there. This is how the universe expands. The people that you find to be lucky, that are able to manifest everything that they want, are the people that put faith in what they want, not in what everybody else wants, especially what their ego tells them, because they take their fear and realize it's just meant to focus you, and I have other ways to become focused other than anxiety, fear, worry, scarcity, all the different things that people live in. If all we do is stay consistent and persistent in the pursuit of our potential, in the acceleration and growth, we will get there. If you are a 10-minute miler and your friend is a 5-minute, 1-second miler, and he is focused on breaking 5 minutes, this is what happened to Roger Bannister. Everybody was so focused on breaking 4 minutes, and he was focused in on acceleration and growth, regardless of all the doctors and experts in the world that said it was humanly impossible for the body to break a 4-minute mile. Then why was it when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute miles, so many people months later broke it as well? Because it broke. They were looking at the acceleration and growth. That's what we have to do. Are you growing and accelerating? Have you learned the lesson? Have you turned those mistakes into miracles? It's that simple. The goal of all of this is simply to be happy, to enjoy the consistent, persistent. There's very easy ways. I get to do things. I don't got to do things. I remember coming home from speaking in China and telling my wife when I was trying how much I missed her and I missed my kids. That's all I would say every time I call them. I'm sure some of you have been there on those trips. And all you can think about is how much time you'd like to spend with your family, and are you making the right decisions by empowering other people? And here you go. And the minute I get home, my wife tells me, "Can you go pick the 15-year-old up?" And I look at her and go, "Are you serious? I have to go pick her up? I just got home from China." And she looks at me, because she's far wiser than me, and said, "You what? Mo, do I have to go pick her up?" She goes, "You have to go pick her up? I'm giving you an opportunity to spend 30 minutes with your 15-year-old after you came back from China, 30 minutes of uninterrupted attention that you can let her communicate to you what's going on in her life, and you have to do that? Or do you get to do that?" What a quick switch it is in your mind if you get to do everything. It's the enjoyment of the consistent, persistent pursuit of our potential. Our mind controls everything that we do. And we can expand and accelerate far beyond any belief. I think back 25 years, if Jeff Bezos came up to me and said, "Hey man, I'm starting an online bookstore." Well, really? With 9600 baud modems? Online bookstore? People put their credit card on the internet? You kidding me? Well, dude, I'm going to be the biggest marketplace in the world and make $100 billion. 25 years ago? I'm an optimist, but come on, man. You better check yourself in. How did he get there? Acceleration and exponential growth. How many people would have voted, yeah, no doubt, $100 billion? I still don't know how you to make $100 billion. But I'll tell you what I've learned, and I'm going to end here and start taking some Q&A. When I looked at Jeff Bezos and started thinking, can I make $100 billion, I tried to reverse engineer it. I wanted to make the what of my life a possibility, get inspired to make $100 billion, to allow it to come through me so I could make significant changes in the world. And I thought, man, if I could figure out the what of the 100 billion, I could become inspired, and it becomes from a possibility, a mathematical advantage of knowing what I want, to a probability, another mathematical advantage of being inspired, cleaning that connection. And then all I have to do is get out of my own way, my ego-based consciousness, to make my probability my perspective or my reality. I get the what, the 100 billion. I get the why. I'm inspired to do it. I'm just not as educated, experienced, and I don't have as much help to understand the how to make it my perspective yet. But I know one thing, there's only one person that stands in my way in $100 billion. Me, right. As long as I can literally stop, drop, and roll as much as I can, improve to accelerate, improve to grow, quicker, the faster I can get back to center, which is why meditation is so important in my life, why I've made this quantum shift in my life to tell you if you're not meditating, you're missing the boat. I'm now the woo-woo medical doctor, theta healer, quantum healer that I met. I am that person. You're making a huge mistake. You have to understand that we can get there. Now, because I haven't figured that out, I decided, then what's going to be my mission until I can figure out $100 billion? I said, I'd like to make everyone on earth happy. Now, that was an interesting one because I started passing that along to my wife. I said, I'm one of the top speakers in the world. I'm one of the top executive coaches in the world. I have a platform on a variety of different social media. I have access. I think I can make the world happy. She looked at me, she said, how are you going to do that? I said, well, one particle of light overcomes millions of particles of darkness. I know that. So if I can share light, share wisdom on how to be happy, to understand gratitude, perspective, forgiveness for peace, accountability for control, and inspiration, if I could teach people these 4 things and really impact them to be happy every day and in consistent behavior, I think I could get there. And she said, well, how? I said, math-wise, what if I could find 1,000 people? And this is why I came here. What if in my lifetime, I'm 51 years old, I can find 1,000 people like you that get it. If I could find 1,000 people that I could empower to teach another 1,000 people to be happy, that'd be 1 million people, right? 1,000 times 1,000 is 1 million. But what if I could get extraordinary people like you that get it, and I could say, what if we spent some time and I could not only teach you to be happy, but empower you to empower 1,000 people to empower 1,000 people to be happy? In my life, that's much more believable than making $100 billion because I know I have that capability. I don't know how many of you here are one of those thousands, but I guarantee I got one. And I know I'll give 999 other speeches the rest of my life until I find those other people. But imagine, 1,000 times 1,000 is 1 million, 1 million times 1,000 is 1 billion. Imagine if we empower 1 billion people simply to be happy. I'm not talking about all the other stuff I teach, the quantum healing and the theta energy and all the different things that I've learned in business. It's just that simple to me. Why not take it back to gratitude, forgiveness, accountability, and inspiration? Why not live inspired life? Why not change people's mindset and perspective, whether they're in sport or through sport? It doesn't matter. Through technology, to me, it's quite simple. Do you want to be one of those 1,000 people for me? Do you want to change the world? Because I guarantee you 1 billion happy people will change this world. They'll live in a world of more than enough. There'll be more than enough for everyone. Things will drastically change. Now, I know that sounds flippin' woo-woo. And if somebody would have told me 20 years ago that I'd stand on a stage like this in San Francisco and tell them that my life mission is to make 1 billion people happy, and I really don't give a shit how much money I have, and I'd much rather pursue this than $100 billion, I would have said there's no way. But I also would have told Jeff Bezos there's no way he could make his 100 billion. And so what I'm asking you today, and the questions hopefully that you have for me, is if one of you, all of you, are willing to think about this and truly dedicate their life to impacting people and making them happy, to be kind to your future self, simply by remembering the lessons that we all know and teaching those lessons so more people remember them every day and enjoy the consistent, persistent pursuit of that potential of true happiness. That's my dream. I appreciate everybody. I'd love to answer questions. Thank you so much. Hopefully someone has a question. Usually we have it. Perfect. Thank you. What's your name?
Robin.
Robin, thank you.
First of all, thank you for sharing your story, your inspiration, and for your desire for happiness. My question feels perhaps a bit out in another field, but it's what's sitting with me and meeting you. My inspiration is not just to make 1,000 people happy, it's to elevate the quality of life for not just people, but the planet and our fellow creatures. So how does your desire for happiness and inspiration meet the needs of our time with our home, the earth, and its fellow creatures, with your big inspiration
I applaud that and agree with that completely. So, pardon? Repeat the question. Yeah. So the question is, I am aligned with everyone being happy, but moreover, her passion, Robin, correct, is what about the environment that we live in? How can we not only be happy, but improve or exist in an environment that not only will be here for us, but for future generations to come? Is that fine? With resources, etc. Here's the interesting philosophy that I have. I believe that happy people get it. I believe that we have a people problem. The earth is going to exist far beyond us if we don't solve our people problem, right? The problem with the earth is truly about us living on the earth, not the earth existing, right? It might be full of toxins and plastics and no oxygen, etc. But the earth will exist. We don't need to save the planet. We need to save ourselves. And the simple solution of how I believe we can attack ignorance, how we can attack climate change, how we can attack anger and frustration, death, disease, they do not exist in the truth. I believe mathematically a higher vibrating planet takes on a higher vibration, meaning that people are kind to their future self when they're happy, so they start doing things that are responsible for creating an environment for happy people, because happy people want to live. Happy people take the perspective that whether they live again or other generations live again, that they want to provide a better place to live than they had. This is all literally within happiness. And so the change in perspective of gratitude, right? Our past is great, our present is better, and our future is even brighter, is completely aligned with saving and improving our planet. I want to say save our planet, improving our planet. Same thing with forgiveness. Right? Forgiveness is part of happiness, that we have to learn to forgive ourselves so we can give that forgiveness away. Create less resistance, less attacks. People tell me all the time, I appreciate your vulnerability. I'm like, well, what I've learned about vulnerability is that I'm invulnerable. When I'm at the truth, when I'm happy, I'm invulnerable, regardless of the facts that I tell you that I went bankrupt, that I was an asshole, that whatever it is, that may seem to you as being vulnerable. To me, that makes me invulnerable. Accountability is a huge factor in climate, right? There's two lessons to learn in accountability. One, what did I do to attract it to myself? And what am I supposed to learn from it? These things that are taught so people can be happy can understand that I have complete control of my own environment, that I am attracting everything, including if I get slammed from behind from a car. People confuse that with liability. Yes, I'm going to call the insurance company. I'm sure there's a California DMV code that deals with somebody that hits you from behind when they're texting. But in my mind, that's just logistics. For me, it's what did I do to attract that to myself? What am I supposed to learn from it? How am I accountable for that? Not liable, but accountable. I think the same holds true with happy people with the earth. How am I accountable for where I live? Not just for me, but for future generations. And it's easier because I believe happy people, positive people, believe they're going to live again. I really do. And the reason I believe that is I think despite any scientific or any proof that you could give it, I think a happy person, when given a choice, would you rather die this lifetime or continue to live on? I think they would choose continue to live on. Therefore, if they want to continue to live on, they probably want to come back to even a nicer planet than when they left. These are all ways, and I think it's a great question, because I think if we start processing and focusing in on happiness, we start realizing, wow, a lot of things change. A lot of the things that we see as scarcity, resistance, shortages, voids, and obstacles in everyday life, right? I mean, don't even want to get political, but happy people won't vote for a certain candidate. Yeah, great question, by the way. Yes. What's your name? I'm sorry.
It doesn't.
Hi.
Hello.
My question is about you. First of all, I love your story. It's fascinating and very inspirational. My question is about, you're talking about ego-based living.
Is this
I've studied
working?
Zen
I
quite a
can't.
bit. And the Buddha is famous for saying a lot of things, but one thing he's very famous for saying is enlightenment is delusion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enlightenment is delusion. And I know that it's really popular right now to kind of teach people to move beyond their ego, have a different experience besides their ego. But in my experience and what I've been learning over the years is that we only have our ego, or a sense
see it as a sense of self. And so I was also warned by my teacher quite a bit about encountering people that have a huge ego about not having an ego. So I was just hoping that you would comment on that.
Yeah, and I agree with that. So the question is, there's a danger in than stating or believing or pursuing that you have no ego, right? That you actually live in a truth-based consciousness. That's not what I believe, right? In fact, I believe that if I could truly heal the world, if I could have one invention, I would give an egoectomy, right? I think it would instantly change the entire existence of the universe. But because that's not possible, that what I suggest or what I try to teach is to, one, be aware of the ego. And Barry and I talked about this as well with fear, to be aware of the ego and utilize it in the appropriate trajectory, right? Because it does allow us to focus. The ego allows us to focus. Now, because the ego is based in fear, it's based in shortages, voids, obstacles, etc., that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, one, and two, that people are void of it, and three, that you can have a big ego, right? That you're more enlightened than other people. I don't believe that, right? I believe certain people can spend less time in ego-based consciousness, have a cleaner connection to that which inspires them. They stay in spirit and are able to carry more energy and allow it to come through them for others. And I think that the more that we understand and are aware and can utilize the ego in the appropriate trajectory, the more power that we have. And that power shows itself in inspiration, right? In being in spirit and gaining energy instead of depreciating, right? And causing depression or causing what I call there's clarity, balance, and focus that creates this energy. So when we're in ego, we don't have clarity, we don't have balance, we have focus, but it's actually a depreciating energy. So we never get to that full, and I wouldn't even call it enlightenment, because I believe we're all enlightened. We're just shadowed by the understanding and lessons that we haven't learned yet. Did that answer your question? Good. That was a great question.
Got time for one more, guys.
All right,
One more.
perfect. What's your name? I'm sorry. I like to.
There are some dark forces that are up against all the positive things in sports. I mean, we've got gambling all over the place, right? Performance-enhancing drugs, violence at stadiums, interesting ways that teams pick who their players are. What do we do to change the culture to defeat all that stuff that's happening at the highest levels?
It's a great question. And sports is a microcosm of the world. We have a problem in sports that people break the rules. Right? We have a problem that people break the rules. Is gambling a problem in sport, or people that are obsessive about gambling the problem? But more importantly, a lot of those are people that are breaking the rules that we all believe collectively. We make a rule and then we break it. There's no morality in a rule. There's no morality in a rule. So for example, if I was here 20 years ago and, told everyone, hey, I believe we should all smoke pot together tonight and have a great time, that's breaking a rule. There's no morality to it other than breaking the rule. It's not moral to break rules that we all agree upon and vote upon within a system. But it wasn't bad to smoke marijuana. In fact, because we changed the rule, now it's good. In essence. So if gambling is legal, gambling is not the problem. Gambling is not the problem. If enhancing drugs are legal, they're not the problem either. If everybody agrees as a collective that this is how we're going to play the game. And I think it is a microcosm of life that we are continually trying to manipulate the rules. We're trying to break the rules. And if you look, sports being that microcosm that's elevated anywhere, if you look at World Cup, if you look at the NCAA, right? I'm on the Olympic Committee, for example. I can give you example after example of how we are evolving to come and become more aware of how we've manipulated and broken the rules. And we're trying to do things. The problem that we're having is it's an information overload because, number one, because of technology, a lot of people that break the rules are more exposed. And two, when they're exposed, it's shared with many more people immediately. So we're overwhelmed, especially people that are older like you and I, where we've been sheltered by what's going on, and it seems overwhelming that, oh my God, every single thing, every single day, I got this guy hitting this person's doing this. Well, let me just take you back to your own college career, whether it be in sports or not, and think to yourself, if all those friends of mine had telephones with cameras and video recorders, and they had 5G, what rules would they know that were broken? What rule, like, just as reality, things have not changed. Human nature does not change. Study history and apply what we're looking at. So what do? We have to take the right perspective. And once again, my quest or mission, and maybe completely utopic, is happy people don't break rules. They don't have a reason. They're abundant. They don't break the rules. When they make a commitment, they keep their commitment. They have a social contract, they keep the social contract. They play by the rules. Happy people do that. And so I think, we can go all down a bunch of incidences, and you'll start, and this would be, I would encourage you to do, is start using happiness as a cure and just thinking through yourself, hey, this bugs the shit out of me. What would happy people do? And literally think, God, maybe Dave actually is right. Maybe we just have a happiness problem and I'm making this too complex. We need to change the mindset, change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I'm saying, look at them with a happy perspective, with gratitude, forgiveness, accountability, and inspiration, and the world will change right in front of us, not only as individuals, but collectively. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, I'll be afterwards. You can ask me anything. Thank you.